There are no verses in the Bible. If someone tells us you ought not judge, what should you say? Why are you judging me for judging? I want to talk about something that I don't ever see anybody else talking about. I mean, at least from what I've experienced in my personal walk with Christ, which is, how do you interpret your Bible? Now, I'm going to walk through four questions you should ask when you interpret any passage in your Bible. Then I'm going to give examples of often misinterpreted passage in your Bible that you've probably, heard against yourself. For example, Jesus said, "Do not judge." That is highly misinterpreted. Misinterpreted. You know what I'm saying. So there's a couple things I want to talk about. I'm probably going to be jumping around a lot, so please bear with me. And first I want to consider there are no verses in the Bible, no verse numbers in the Bible. Those were added 500 years ago so that we could better navigate the text. Like, imagine if your pastor opened the Bible and he said, "Meet me about 2/3 of the way in." That wouldn't work. You guys would just be trying to find the same spot. It'd be basically impossible without verse and chapter numbers. So the first example of a misinterpreted passage I want to talk about is Philippians 4:10 through 13, where Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now I want to ask you this question. Is he saying I can accomplish all things through Christ who strengthens me, or can I endure all things through Christ who strengthens me? I want to say I can endure through Christ who strengthens me. I say this because the verses before it, Paul says, "I learned whatever state I am in to be content." So Paul is saying he's learned to endure all things and be content in any situation, whether he's, hungry, full, persecuted, or comfortable. And then I also wanted to talk about, the Jesus says, "Do not judge" passage, which is Matthew 7:1 through 5, where if you have your Bible, go ahead and turn there for me. And until then, I'm going to ask you two questions. As followers of Jesus, are we allowed to judge others? Now you're probably either saying no, or I can judge righteously. And then I got a second question, which is, if someone tells us you ought not judge, what should you say? Just put the Bible down for a second. Someone tells you you ought not judge. What should you say? You should say, "Why are you judging me for judging?" They would be a hypocrite in that situation because they're saying you ought not judge, and that is a judgment in itself. So let's read Matthew 1 through 5. Hopefully you're all turned there now, and we'll talk about the four things you got to ask to interpret any passage. So this is Jesus talking. He says, "Judge not, that you be not judged. For what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye, you hypocrite?" Notice, hypocrite is a judgment. He goes on to say, "First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." So if Jesus isn't a hypocrite, you should have noticed this isn't a command to not judge, but a lesson on how to judge. He tells us to remove the plank out of our own eye so we can see clearly to remove the speck out of our brother's eye. So it's a command to not judge hypocritically. He's not saying do not judge at all. And then, so for proper understanding and application, you should ask these four questions about each passage. Who was the passage written to? What's the situation? What's the literary style? And is this passage descriptive or descriptive? Did I say descriptive twice? Prescriptive or descriptive? Now, I do want to go ahead and apply these four questions to the creation story. I find the creation story is a really huge talking point. There's so many books written about it. Even John Lennox has one called The 7 Days That Divide the World, I believe. And it's even when I brought this up in my Bible study, we talked about it for so long. Like, we were there for probably 2.5 hours, and that was the longest Bible study we've had thus far. So first, I want to ask you, who was Genesis written to? Well, it'd be the Israelites of the Exodus, God's chosen people, right? Then what is the situation that they are in? God just had Moses deliver his people from slavery in Egypt. That's their situation. We know this because Exodus 3:10, when God is speaking to Moses through the burning bush, he says, "Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Then number 3, what's the literary style? This is a highly kind of debated topic in a way, but a lot of scholars are now considering, or are now agreeing, scholars and theologians are now agreeing, this is a polemic to the Egyptian and pagan nations in the area, an attempt to argue against or refute their pagan myths and beliefs. Now, we are going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. I want to go ahead and jump to number 4, though, which is the passage prescriptive or descriptive? Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 1 through 11. I mean, everybody knows that, right? That's the whole creation story. That's what we're talking about. So if you haven't flipped there yet, I would go ahead and do so. But it's obviously descriptive. Like, it's not prescribing us to go out and do something, like do stuff. It's, more of a description on, how God created things, or more of a description, in my opinion, that God created in general. I don't know if it's an exact orderly account or anything like that, but I do know it's a description of that God is the creator. So I say this because it's not prescribing to, us to go out and do anything, but describing to the Israelites of the Exodus that there was a creation event, that Yahweh is the ultimate creator of everything they see around them, and all other gods are lifeless idols created by men. All right, so those are the 4 questions. I said we were going to go ahead and talk about number 3, the polemic, the literary style. And so I just want to use an example real quick, which is the first verse of the Bible. So for example, Egyptians believed in polytheism, which is many gods. Then we have the opening verse to Genesis, which is God, singular, created the heavens and the earth. See, this is already a refutation to the idea that there's many gods. This is what the Egyptians had indoctrinated God's people with all these years they were in slavery. And then I want to talk about those gods. Yes, I want to talk about the pagan gods that they might have believed in. And you will know the first one. Hopefully, if you've watched Mr. Peabody and Sherman, you'll know that when they went back in time to Egypt and met King Tut, that they, to escape, they had to get in the mouth of this giant dog character, blow fire out of his mouth, and give commands. If you know about that, then you know that is the sun god Ra. And then the pagans, they also had a sun god, which is the sun god Molech. So you might be asking, well, what is the polemic against these sun gods? Well, obviously, if you've read Genesis, then you know what I'm talking about, because who created all the lights? Well, that'd be God. So God said, let there be lights in the firmament. God goes on to say he made one great light to rule the day and one lesser light to rule the night. And he also made the stars. This is basically a shot at the sun and moon gods or any other celestial bodies they might be worshiping. So he's kind of like laying it out flat for them. Like, he's not leaving any room for them to keep these, Egyptian pagan beliefs. He's standing out there and he's like, I created all this. I give these celestial bodies the power to give that light in, and so on. Like, everything pulls, like, everything pulls the power. Like, I give everything the power to do it. Like, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm trying to figure out the words to explain this right. And then, if you know who I am, this is actually about the closest name I have to my name being biblical, which is the pagan fish god Dagon. You know me, my name's Dagon, and I didn't get no cool name like like Abraham or Moses. I got a fish god. See, the funny thing about this is he's not even really a fish god. He's half fish, half man. He's really the god of fertility, more in the agriculture area. So, what is the polemic against him? God says, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit." Once again, this is taking a shot at a false idol. And Dagon hasn't even mentioned yet, which Dagon is mentioned. And obviously the Philistines didn't get the idea because that's who they worshipped, was Dagon. And if you want to go ahead and turn to 1 Samuel chapter 5, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's very interesting. I suggest you either pause the video, do that now, or come back, or go back after the video and do it, because it's a very interesting chapter. 1 Samuel chapter 5. But from all this, it seems to me Genesis is a polemic in that these theologians and like scholars are, correct on this. And so it's basically, so now that God got his people out of Egypt, this is God's attempt to get Egypt out of his people. So God got Israel out of Egypt. Now he's getting Egypt out of Israel. And I want to do a little thought experiment real quick. Imagine for a second you were the Israelites that were just saved from Egypt and are now going to be traversing the desert for 40 years. Do you think you'd be asking where did everything come from and how it was made? You probably wouldn't be asking that. You wouldn't be asking what we're asking today in the 21st century. But if you remember, like if you just left there, you're like, I just left all my food, I left my place to sleep, I left everything I've ever known to go sacrifice to this Yahweh God in the wilderness. Like, you just left everything. And so you're going to be asking, well, is Yahweh the true God, or are the gods of Egypt the true gods? And I believe that's what the Genesis story is. It's a polemic against those false beliefs they held. Now, I want to encourage everybody, that is and that's all I got for this. But I want to encourage everybody to go out and apply those 4 questions to a random chapter or verse in the Bible. Maybe your favorite chapter and verse in the Bible. Put those 4 questions on it, and you'll come to the proper interpretation of it, and you'll find out, well, I've been holding the correct interpretation of this the whole time, or I didn't quite have it right. But it's always good if you're really searching for truth. It's always really good to know that you have it right, know that you got the proper context. So I pray and encourage you guys that that you guys would go and use this information and see if it actually works for you. My Bible study seemed to have liked it, and I'm sharing it with you. Maybe you'll like it too. So after you're done doing that, if you would come back, comment, and see if it worked, and let me know what conclusion you came to. Like, does this actually work or not? I'd love to hear it.